Okay, so let's assume that somebody gave you the problem -5 plus 4 equals x, and they want you to try to solve this problem. Okay, now the problem is that you might not understand how this works just by looking at the numbers. You have a -5, you have a -4, or a +4, excuse me. You're not sure how they match up. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to represent the -5, okay, or any negative number with a red dot or an orange dot, however you want to say it. Okay, so this is equal to one negative unit, okay, or -1. Okay, right, one negative unit. And if you see a positive number, so in this case +4, I want you to represent it with a green dot. And with a green dot, one positive unit. Okay. And in the case of this problem, right, if we're going to try to represent these guys, this problem using these dots, all right. So I'm going to take my -5 and I'm going to write that right here. And I'm going to try to represent that using orange dots because that's equal to one negative unit. So since I have -5, that's 5 negative units, I'm going to represent that using orange dots. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing with +4. And since there's the sign in front of it is positive, right? So this gives me a +4. And that is going to represent 4 green dots because those are 4 positive units. Okay. And what I want you to do is every time that you write a problem like this, I want you to pair off every negative unit with a positive unit or vice versa. So in this case, right, we've got one negative unit and one positive unit there, one negative and one positive unit there, one there, and one there. Okay. And then I want you to count up the number of negative numbers or positive numbers or dots that you have left, and you're going to represent that number with an integer. Okay. So in this case, I'm left with this one orange dot, and that represents one negative unit. So I know that -5 plus -4 is equal to -1, okay, or one negative unit. Okay, just like that. And you can do this with any problem, okay, any problem that you want. Say that somebody gave you the problem, say that we changed that up and we said -5. Let's do negative. Yeah, you know what? Let's do 10. Why don't we do 10? Let's do 10 plus a -4. Okay, so any problem that you want, you can do it with any set of integers that you want. And let's represent this using orange and green dots. So we know 10 is a positive number, right? Because we know this empty space, right, is the same thing as a positive number. And since there are 10 positive units, I need 10 positive dots, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10. Okay, 2 sets of 5. And I'm going to do the same thing with our -4. And since we have a -4, that's a negative unit, I'm going to represent those with the negative dots, right? Those orange dots. And I have 4 of those. And now I'm going to pair off what I have, right? I'm going to pair off one positive number and one negative number. So I'm going to pair off an orange and a green dot 4 times because there's 4 orange dots. And what I'm left over with, right? What I'm left over with are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positive dots. Okay. So I know that 10 plus negative 4 is equal to positive 6. Okay? Now, let's assume that instead of these smaller numbers, let's say that we got a large number. Okay? Let's say instead of 10, let's say we had 36, and they want us to add in, say, a negative 15. Okay? Now, you might be somebody who's very ambitious and you're like, hey, I can do this. I can draw 36 green dots and 15 orange dots. I'm not that ambitious. I don't want to do that. There's an easier way to kind of figure out how to add up these numbers, okay, or subtract them potentially, okay? And what you're going to do is I want you to look at the signs in front of the numbers, okay? Kind of what we did over here, but I want you to look at the signs of the numbers. And if the signs are the same, okay, so if the signs are the same, okay, I want you to add, and then I want you to keep the sign, keep the same sign, okay? And if the signs are different, so let me highlight that for you. If the signs are the same, okay, I want you to add and keep the same sign. If the signs are different, so if the signs are different, okay, if the signs are different, I want you to, if the signs are different, okay, if the signs are different, I want you to subtract, okay, and I want you to keep the sign of the greater absolute value, okay, of the greater absolute value. Okay. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take the case of 36 plus negative 15. Okay. So what I'm noticing here is that this 36, this is a positive 36, so it gets a plus sign over here. And directly in front of this 15 is a negative sign. So the signs are different, which means I'm going to subtract normally, and then I'm going to keep the sign of the greater absolute value. Okay, so 36 is positive, so I'm gonna write that as green for us here. So 36, right? They told me to subtract, so 36 minus 15. Subtract those two numbers here. Okay, 36 and 15. I'm going to subtract those two. All right. 36 minus 15, right? 6 minus 5 is a 1. And then 3 minus 1 is 2. And because they want me to keep the sign of the greater absolute value, remember, absolute value means that I'm taking the positive version of whatever number I see, regardless if it's negative or positive. Okay. The larger of the two was this 36, absolute value wise, right? 36 is the bigger number both ways, but 36 has the larger absolute value. So I'm going to keep my answer the same, or positive 21. Okay. So we know that 36 plus negative 13 is equal to a positive 21. Okay. Now let's try one more. Let's say if the signs are the same, right? Let's look at the signs being the same. Let's say I did negative 8. Why don't we do negative 8? And I'm going to subtract 2, and I'd like to know what this equals. Okay, so negative 8 minus 2. All right, and we could draw our dots out if we want to. Why don't we do that just to be consistent here, right? So let's take negative 8, right? And that's this down here. We've got negative 8. Let me change colors here because negative was orange. I'm going to use my orange dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we also have this negative 2, right? We have negative 2, which we can also represent using an orange dot, right? Because those are both negative. They're the same sign. So if we play our cards right, if we do this math correctly, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, negative 10, right? A should be negative 10. Now let's look, right? Both of these signs are the same. We've got a negative 8 here, and then we actually have this negative sign in front. This makes it a negative 2. And what we were told is if the signs are the same, you're going to add, right? And then you're going to keep the same sign. So I'm going to add, right? Because I've got the same sign. I've got 8 and 2 together, right? 8 plus 2 gives me 10. And then because I want to keep the same sign, right? We started off with 2 negatives. So I'm going to put my 10 as a negative 10 instead. So A should equal negative 10. Okay? So when you see signs that are the same, you need to add up the sides, or excuse me, add up the numbers and then keep the same sign. If the signs are different, you have to subtract and then keep the sign of the greatest absolute value. Let's try one more. Let's try 3 numbers. Why not? Let's try 3 numbers. So let's say, let me divide that up here. Let's say that I had negative 10 and they want me to add a negative 1 and then they want me to add a positive 1. Okay? We want to know what that equals. So let's start with this 10, this negative 10 and this negative 1, right? Doesn't matter if we're adding or subtracting, doesn't matter if, which one we're doing. We're looking at the signs. The signs are the same, right? So we have a negative 10 and a negative 1. The signs are the same. So I'm going to add, and then I'm going to keep the same sign. All right, so down here, right? So 10, positive 10, right? Just that absolute value, plus a 1 should give me 11, right? 10 and 1 gives me 11 because I'm going to add. And then since I started with a negative, I'm going to keep that 11 a negative, okay? And then we've still got this plus 1 over here, right? And that's equal to x. And again, I see that I have the same sign. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have a different sign, right? I have a different sign. So now I've got a different sign. I'm going to subtract, and then I'm going to keep the sign of the greatest absolute value. So 11 minus a 1, right? We're subtracting. 11 minus a 1 gives me 10, right? 11 minus 1 is 10. And I'm going to keep the sign of the greatest absolute value. Remember, we're going to take these two numbers, whichever one's larger, you keep that sign. The negative 11 is bigger, absolute value, right? So I get negative 10. Okay. So again, if the signs are the same, you add, keep the same sign. If the signs are different, you subtract and keep the sign of the greatest absolute value.